An armful of Kusa grass before falling asleep, Svasti sat beneath a bamboo tree and recalled the months he had first met the Buddha. He was just 11 years old then, and his mother had recently died, leaving him in charge of his 3 younger siblings. His youngest sister, an infant, had no milk to drink. Luckily, a man in the village named Rampu hired Svasti to tend his water buffaloes, 4 grown buffaloes and 1 calf. And so Svasti was able to milk a buffalo cow every day and feed his baby sister. He tended the water buffaloes with utmost care, for he knew that he had to keep his job or his siblings would starve. Since his father's death, their roof had not been rethatched, and every time it rained, Rupak had to scurry about placing stone jars beneath the gaping holes to catch the rainwater. Bala was only 6 years old but had to learn to cook, care for her baby sister, and gather firewood in the forest. Though just a small child, she could knead flour into chapati bread for her siblings to eat. Rarely could they buy even a bit of curry powder. When Svasti led the buffaloes back to their stable, the tantalizing fragrance of curry drifting from Rampu's kitchen made his mouth water. Chapati dipped in curry sauce cooked with meat had been an unknown luxury since his father died. The children's clothes were little more than rags. Svasti owned but one worn dhoti. When it was cold he wrapped an old brown cloth around his shoulders. It was threadbare and faded, but precious to him nonetheless. Svasti had to find good grazing spots for the buffaloes, for if he returned them to their stable hungry, he knew he would be beaten by Mr. Rampu. In addition, he had to carry home a sizable bundle of grass every evening for the buffaloes to eat throughout the night. On evenings when the mosquitoes were thick, Svasti lit a fire to chase them away with the smoke. Rampu paid him in rice, flour, and salt every 3 days. Some days, Svasti was able to bring home a few fish that he had caught along the edges of the Narandhara river for Bhima to cook. One afternoon, after he had bathed the buffaloes and cut a bushel of grass, Svasti felt like spending a quiet moment alone in the cool forest. Leaving the buffaloes grazing at the forest's edge, Svasti looked about for a tall tree to rest against. Suddenly he stopped. There was a man sitting silently beneath a pipala tree, no more than 20 feet away. Svasti gazed at him in wonder. He had never before seen anyone sit so beautifully. The man's back was perfectly straight, and his feet rested elegantly upon his thighs. He held himself with utmost stability and inner purpose. His eyes appeared to be half closed, and his folded hands rested lightly on his lap. He wore a faded yellow robe which left one shoulder bare. His body radiated peace, serenity, and majesty. Just one look at him, and Svasti felt wondrously refreshed. His heart trembled. He did not understand how he could feel something so special for a person he hadn't even met, but he stood immobile in utter respect for a long moment. Then the man opened his eyes. He did not see Svasti at first, as he uncrossed his legs and gently massaged his ankles and the soles of his feet. Slowly he stood up and began to walk. Because he walked in the opposite direction, he still did not see Svasti. Without making a sound, Svasti watched the man take slow, meditative steps along the forest floor. After 7 or 8 such steps, the man turned around, and it was then that he noticed Svasti. He smiled at the boy. No one had ever smiled with such gentle tolerance at Svasti before. As though drawn by an invisible force, Svasti ran towards the man, but when he was within a few feet, he stopped in his tracks, remembering that he had no right to approach anyone of higher caste. Svasti was an untouchable. He did not belong to any of the 4 social castes. His father had explained to him that the Brahmana caste was the highest, and people born into this caste were priests and teachers who read and understood the Vedas and other scriptures and made offerings to the gods. When Brahma created the human race, the Brahman issued from his mouth. The Kshatriya were the next highest caste. They could hold political and military positions, as they had issued from Brahma's 2 hands. Those of the Vaisya caste were merchants, farmers, and craftspeople who had sprung from Brahma's thighs. Those of the Sudra caste had come from Brahma's feet and were the lowest of the 4 castes. They did only the manual labor not performed by the higher castes. But Svasti's family members were untouchables, those who had no caste at all. They were required to build their homes outside of the village limits, and they did the lowest kinds of work such as collecting garbage, spreading manure, digging roads, feeding pigs, and tending water buffaloes. Everyone had to accept the caste into which he or she was born. The sacred scriptures taught that happiness was the ability to accept one's position. If an untouchable like Svasti touched a person of a higher caste, he would be beaten. In the village of Uruvela, an untouchable man had been beaten severely for touching a Brahman with his hand. A Brahman or Kshatriya touched by an untouchable was considered polluted and had to return home to fast and do penance for several weeks in order to cleanse himself. Whenever Svasti led the buffaloes home, he took great pains not to pass near any person of high caste on the road or outside Rampu's house. It seemed to Svasti that even the buffaloes were more fortunate than he, because a Brahman could touch a buffalo without being polluted. Even if, through no fault of the untouchable, a person of higher caste accidentally brushed against him, the untouchable could still be ruthlessly beaten. Here, before Svasti, stood a most attractive man, and it was clear from his bearing that he did not share the same social status. Surely someone with so kind and tolerant a smile would not beat Svasti even if he did touch him, but Svasti did not want to be the cause of pollution of someone so special, and that was why he froze when he and the man were a few steps apart. Seeing Svasti's hesitation, the man stepped forward himself. Svasti stepped back to avoid coming in contact with the man, but the man was quicker, and in the blink of an eye had grasped Svasti by the shoulder with his left hand. With his right hand, he gave Svasti a tender pat on the head. Svasti stood motionless. No one had ever touched him on the head in so gentle and affectionate way, and yet he felt suddenly panic-stricken. "Don't be afraid, child," the man said in a quiet and reassuring voice. At the sound of that voice, Svasti's fears disappeared. He lifted his head and gazed at the man's kind and tolerant smile. After hesitating for a moment, he stammered, "Sir, I like you very much." The man lifted Svasti's chin in his hand and looked into the boy's eyes. "And I like you also. Do you live nearby?" Svasti did not answer. He took the man's left hand in his own two hands and asked the question that was troubling him, "When I touch you like this, aren't you being polluted?" The man laughed and shook his head. "Not at all, child. You are a human being and I am a human being. You can't pollute me. Don't listen to what people tell you." He took Svasti's hand and walked with him to the edge of the forest. The water buffaloes were still grazing peacefully. The man looked at Svasti and asked, "Do you tend these buffaloes? And that must be the grass you have cut for their dinner. What is your name? Is your house nearby?" Svasti offered Siddhartha an armful of kusa grass to use as a cushion. Svasti answered politely, "Yes, sir, I care for these 4 buffaloes and that 1 calf, and that is the grass I cut. My name is Svasti and I live on the other side of the river just beyond the village of Uruvela. Please, sir, what is your name and where do you live? Can you tell me?" The man answered kindly, "Certainly. My name is Siddhartha, and my home is far away, but at present I am living in this forest. Are you a hermit?" Siddhartha nodded. Svasti knew that hermits were men who usually lived and meditated up in the mountains. Though they had just met and exchanged no more than a few words, Svasti felt a warm bond with his new friend. In Uruvela, no one had ever treated him in so friendly a way or spoken to him with such warmth. A great happiness surged within him, and he wanted to somehow express his joy. If only he had some gift he could offer Siddhartha. But there was no penny in his pocket, not even a piece of sugar cane or rock candy. What could he offer? He had nothing, but he summoned the courage to say, "Mister, I wish I had something to give you as a gift, but I have nothing." Siddhartha looked at Svasti and smiled. "But you do. You have something I would like very much." "I do?" Siddhartha pointed to the pile of kusa grass. "That grass you have cut for the buffaloes is soft and fragrant. If you could give me a few handfuls, I shall make a sitting cushion for my meditation beneath the tree. That would make me very happy." Svasti's eyes shone. He ran to the pile of grass, gathered a large bundle in his thin arms, and offered it to Siddhartha. "I just cut this grass down by the river. Please accept it. I can easily cut more for the buffaloes." Siddhartha placed his hands together like a lotus bud and accepted the gift. He said, "You are a very kind boy. I thank you. Go and cut some more grass for your buffaloes before it grows too late. If you have a chance, please come and see me tomorrow afternoon in the forest again." Young Svasti bowed his head in farewell and stood watching as Siddhartha disappeared back into the forest. Then he picked up his sickle and headed for the shore, his heart filled with the warmest of feelings. It was early autumn. The kusa grass was still soft and his sickle was newly sharpened. It wasn't long at all before Svasti had cut another large armful of kusa grass. Svasti led the buffaloes to Rampu's home, guiding them to cross a shallow section of the Naranjara River. The calf was reluctant to leave the sweet grass along the shore and Svasti had to coax her along. The bushel of grass on his shoulder was not heavy and Svasti waded across the river together with the buffaloes.